Hey guys, going to talk about CMMB. Very interesting play. Very interesting about what happened at market open. But first of all, quick pre-market pop. I actually thought this was great. We had a little low volume pop. Three candles straight up, almost 100%. You get a pullback, you get the second rotation fails, and then, goes under VWAP, loses volume. Um, I was in this play. A lot of my Discord room was in this play. If anyone wants more information, it's in the description down below. But a lot of people were short in the ones here, and I'm like, oh, this looks great. But like I've been talking, you always have to have a bullish thesis. Obviously, I'm bearish to trade, has good technicals. I'm like, well, what would be bullish? It's like possible bullishes. We've seen, like I said in my last video, these quick pullbacks can get attacked. Um, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. Especially with CMMB is a former fader. It's a low flow fader. Has chances for manipulation, but was really expecting this to fade. But during this pullback, I actually posted. This is a book map, which I've been going over in my recent videos. Um, I noticed this was just kind of chilling under VWAP. It was popping back up with some volume. I'm like, well, it doesn't super mean anything. Still pretty bearish, but let me look at the book, right? And if we zoom out on the book, we can actually zoom right here, they're stacking a lot of bids on these pullbacks. So not only are they stacking bids, they're stacking follow-up bids, right? That's what these orange lines are. And this is when I posted it to my room. I was like, hey, they're stacking bids in the 90s, right? You have these bid stacks, which is really not why I don't want to see 20,000 shares just come out of nowhere on a pattern that is normally super bearish, right? I was like, well, the volume over here is still not super impressive. It's mostly under 100K. Maybe it just, starts to hit VWAP resistance, maybe pokes a little bit, rolls over. Like, I wasn't too concerned. I'm like, the volume, I think right around here in my Discord, I was like, the volume hasn't come in yet. Um, but we did see those bids. Those bids are possibly bullish, but it's really this high volume VWAP push. And again, it's like, what's the difference between these high volume pushes that break highs and these high volume pushes that are just long traps, like my TAOP video that goes straight down? And oftentimes it's our bids following it up, right? And as soon as it starts squeezing one, I already see bid. It gets up here, more bids, more. I'm starting to see the bids followed up. This is very not what you want to see. It pulls back to where the bid stacks are. The bids don't disappear. They're not being pulled. A lot of them aren't even being tested. And this is very bullish, right? Because now you have what is potentially a high day squeeze. Bid support down in the 90s, bid support on the VWAP reclaim, and a bunch of empty space to the upside. Um, and I just took the loss on the push, right? The push towards highs, just took the loss, and then it started doing something I normally consider to be very bullish. It's like when the stocks just start making higher highs with a lot of consistent volume, it shows to me that a lot of possible accumulations happening, that even if there is a pullback, usually there's some type of move to the upside later on. Could even be new highs. It often is. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go make coffee because I was like, I really don't have a read um, on this push. And what's interesting on this push is they were actually flashing these like 50,000 share. You see right here, here's an 80,000 share bidder flashing these big bids on the way up. It was like 80K, 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 80K. Here you see 60K. Like there's just like these, every penny there seemed to be these big bids pushing it up. And I was like, all right, well, I don't really have a read on this grind. I'll go make coffee. Then I came back and the thing's down 30%. And I'm like, wow. I was like, this is such a weird chart because a lot of this action is very strong, right? There's a lot of strong um, low float things happening on this stock. I was very surprised to see this selling. I was like, well, what can they do, right? And I noticed, there's a lot of empty space up here. So I was like, okay, well, maybe at least we'll get a rotation back up here. It really has to get above VWAP for me to really consider. I'm not in the short for me to consider it. But here's the interesting thing. This is like I've almost never seen this. This is one of the more interesting bookmap things I've seen really since MTC, the MTC parabolic into the liquidation, right? That thing had an insane bookmap. And this, I start noticing this guy coming in. This guy's on the bid, and he's throwing up like 50,000 shares, right? And if you see this guy down at support is getting filled like 50K, 60K, and then he puts another 50K on. Gets filled another 50, 60K, puts another 50K on, gets filled 70K, puts another 50K. I was like, I'm putting the context of this accumulation, this big dump, this empty space. I was like, man, this guy is just loading up, and then he seems to be gone here. It breaks down, and then he just puts another 50K, a few cents lower. So now we got even more, right? Um, so this guy is getting filled. I think I counted in the pre-market. If you count all the buying that this guy did, and it seems to be a single player, and the reason I think that is because it's such a large amount at one price point, and he's repeatedly doing similar size at the same level over and over and over again. I'm like, man, this guy is really loading up. So he ended up buying down here. It was something like over 500,000 shares. I was guessing like 700K. I'm like, this dude bought so many shares, and then he started rotating it back up into market open. Now a lot of these rotations on market open, I actually consider, whenever I see like big pushes right before market open, I actually consider it kind of bearish. A lot of times you see this like 920, 925 manipulation gets pushed, and then they pull it, right? But I'm like, all right, like I said, I don't really take 930 trades. And we get a pattern we've seen low floats all the time, right? We get a deep pullback under support. They start throwing up bids. Um, there's bids at point 0.9 where and of course I'm remembering where the buyer was. I'm like, there's that point 0.9 guy, and then this is like consolidating at point 0.92. I notice there's a lot of empty space to the upside, and just like I've been seeing in my videos, I was like, all right, well, you know, when this push happens through this empty space, I'm looking at where the asks are stacked up higher. In this case, they're all at 105, 106, 107, and I'm waiting to see if bids, just like in a pre-market, are bids following it up. And what I'm noticing is that bids are not following it up. Right? There's no bids following this up, and it's hitting the key levels. Right? It's hitting the levels that were there before. And one thing I told my Discord room, I was like, on these like manipulated pre-market kind of squeezes, these often have to go straight up. If these don't go straight up, and they give these pullbacks where like retail longs can like buy dips because they see this action, they see the volume. It's the biggest volume candle of the day. If you get like a pullback and with like VWAP support holding, and retail longs could see they could buy the dip because they think the squeeze is coming. I always think that's incredibly bearish, right? Because if you want something, um, a lot of low float longs will look like this, right? It'll look like you'll get, for example, a high day clear out into an instant squeeze like a PXMD, or if you go to PXMD from it's market open day, it's the same thing, right? Like you get the support swipe into the instant push, right? They're really not letting. In fact, they shook out the longs by swiping support and then instant squeeze without letting them have a chance to get in. That's usually what happens if something's going to go straight up, right? So when I see this start stalling, and I'm looking at the book, I'm seeing there's not a huge amount of bid support following this up. I see up here that not only are there offers at 1.07, which we're getting restacked as 110, so now I have a clean risk level. I'm like, all right, there's like all these offers. It has to get through, especially 110. It's stalling. No bids following it up, and me and a bunch of people in my room went short this. 104s, 103s, 105s, like that type of thing. And we got the move I wanted, just straight back down to where the bids are. I'm like, cool. I was like, now we can maybe get like a .9 crack, right? Because that's like there's kind of like this painted support level. Um, there's these lows here, there's these higher lows, and I'm like, all right. Um, hopefully we just get a .9 crack and it's an easy trade. And then this candle happens. So this, by the way, if you look at the book, this candle happened instantaneously. This was at support, and it went from here. So this would be 10:03:31 to 10:03:30. Actually, really 10:03:30, about 36. Um, in about 5 seconds, is teleported straight from the bottom of support to 105. Went straight up in about 3-4 seconds. But it's the same concept. Like, if this is going to be some crazy manipulated squeeze, like there should be continuation. There shouldn't be pullbacks. There shouldn't be any type of consolidation. There shouldn't be like a low volume pullback. Like, um, or any of that stuff, and my risk, were these, there's these ask at 110 and 115. Those were the levels I was, because that's where the stacks were on the on the book map. So it's like, okay, like my risk is up here, and this just didn't have any continuation, right? And we got another pullback, and I'm like, cool. Now this is gonna dump .9, right? But I always remember that bidder, man. I'm like, man, this guy bought like 500, 700,000 shares, and he has to be buying over here. He has to be supporting this bid at market. Obviously he's selling into these pushes a little bit, but I mean, ultimately he's supporting this bid. He's bought a lot of shares. And then we get, push number, what is this, like four? Push number four. And I'm like, well, I'm just, at this point, we zoom out on the book map. At this point, on this rotation, I'm just like, if we do that, I'm like, it has to just eat through all these levels. Like, there's levels at 103, 105, 106, 110. I'm like, um, this is where the bookmap's really nice with like not freaking out on these pushes, because it's like, well, it has to eat through all these orders into whatever level you're ultimately using as your risk. And if you start to see low flow stuff like these aggressive moves that start stalling and don't go anywhere, you don't have to really freak out. You're just like, well, I'm just looking at the book, I'm looking at the orders, and like it just has to go through. And then you start seeing orders getting stacked lower and lower and lower, and this is great. Like you get these like aggressive moves, and then the orders start pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it. I'm like, okay, like now it has even more orders it's got to get through. So, it eventually came down here, and I'm like, all right, man, this thing attempted to do, 1, 2, 3 big pushes. They're coming down to like what's a million higher lows right on the 1 minute 200, right? You got a bunch of higher lows. And I'm thinking about that .9 buyer. I'm like, man, if this thing doesn't go, like that guy who bought all those shares is going to be super, super bagged. And what we notice is right before the crack, by the way, something interesting happened. If you notice on the order book, so this is that consolidation, there's like nothing between support and .99. There's a bunch of empty space here. But then right before the crack, you actually start to see, these 40,000 shares come in at multiple levels. So like, and this happened on, God, what was that play yesterday? It's happened on, oh God, what was that play? Sorry guys, let me look it up because this is actually very, this is very useful. This is very useful to know when they start stacking. Um, they start to a stock goes through a long period of consolidation. It essentially consolidates for what do you call it? Like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and you don't always get this signal. But what happens is it consolidates for a few hours, and then they throw up a bunch of offers that weren't there during a multi-hour consolidation. And I'm going through my Discord because it's in there. ABVC. It was on TIVC. Okay, I'll open up TIVC. We saw the same thing where it's like this hour plus long consolidation. Big ask gets thrown up, and it forces the stock through support. And now I'm just thinking, man, this guy is so bad. This guy bought so many shares at point 0.9. The rig went nowhere, and now this dude just has to sell because he had to buy like 1 million plus shares of that stock, and then we just got relentless selling, right? Like it's doing like manipulated stuff, but just like a relentless selling down to the bottom. So if we go to TVIC from uh, this day, it was the same thing. I think I did in my video right here. They stacked a bunch of ass right here that weren't here before. They pushed it down, and we got into the low twos and sub two and that type of thing. So interesting play. So I guess key little lessons here is I like to do key lessons at the end of these videos for anyone who kind of stuck around. Yeah, the bid support in the 90s with the follow-up bid support on this push. That's very bullish. Um, didn't really have any reads up here, to be perfectly honest. And yeah, that dude who bought 700,000 shares at point 0.9 down here and initiated this rig. And yeah, no bid follow-up here. Also, really no bid follow-up here. No bid follow-up on these big pushes. You get a stall. Retail wants a chase. Yeah, there were some painted lower highs, so I'm always keeping an eye on that, but that doesn't necessarily mean the stock has the liquidity to break them. And yeah, these stalls are great. When I see overly extremely aggressive moves on low floats that give retail a chance to buy the dip, and it doesn't go anywhere. Super bearish. And then yeah, the big ass came in right here, shoved it down, and we got a nice fade. So yeah, CMMB, that is that trade. I also traded SPRC. Actually had shares of it this time and made some good trades on that. So took a small loss in the beginning and made more than all of it back on the backside. So yeah, CMMB, low float stuff. See you guys.